This is the next stage is how to gift yourself self-forgiveness, how to learn self-forgiveness.
So this is a chakra called?
The sacral chakra.
Sacral chakra. And it's orange in colour.
Yes.
So we're talking about self-forgiveness, so this might be a little bit longer, this one, because there's a few key elements with self-limiting beliefs, a continuous use of your traumatic situation, the victim mentality, stuff that we need to break through. So we need to talk about, behind the framework of the chakra, the sacral chakra, is the term self-forgiveness, and what does that mean for us?
Yeah, so for me, self-forgiveness is where self-knowledge begins, really, because we're all, as we move away, like if we're born as a blank sheet or a clean sheet of paper, just existence means we make mistakes. We're faced with choices and options and opportunities and invitations, and each time we make a choice to, it's either red or white or black or blue, and each decision and choice we make involves an element of not having or missing out, or as you look back on it, it can actually be a mistake or a regret, or it can be just a bad behaviour, or you can be establishing a bad pattern. So as you age and grow and become an adult and go through life's journey, those opportunities to make errors and make mistakes, which require self-forgiveness, mount and build, don't they? So being able to flush out and forgive ourselves for our oversights and our errors and our mistakes is critical to be able to maintain ourselves as we go forward. Because as we age and we don't forgive ourselves, we become clogged with those episodes that have affected us, and our book becomes full. So we're walking around as a full book, clogged with our old regrets and our past, and there's not much space to let anything else in, any new things or any change or any opportunities. So you're literally a meat suit just walking around with your old crap. So that's where self-forgiveness, it's the beginning of the cycle of letting go and releasing. And forgiveness for me was most massively demonstrated the idea of we're all suffering the human condition, and if we can't forgive ourselves and empty that bucket of mistakes and say, okay, I made some mistakes, that's what humans do, it really limits, it narrows your horizon going forward, because you're just not willing to take risks. You're not willing to step outside your comfort zone because you're basically ruled by fear.
So yeah, so linking into that, the key for me is that if we don't let go of all these limitations that society or that other people have put onto us, these trauma states, then the energy is stagnant, and just the layers of the energy, if we wanted to talk about it like that, because we know that we're made of energy. So we need to unwrap that energy, and we need to cut cords with stuff that doesn't matter to us any longer, and we need to take hold of the fact that, are we a prisoner of the stuff that people have put onto us, that their expectations, their ideas of what our life needed to be. You know, we need to bring our spirit into our purpose-driven life. And so for me, you know, the affirmation that I use key for self-forgiveness is, I am in charge, I am responsible, and I choose to take action. So with this chakra, you know, we're talking a lot about freshness and about joy. You know, that is what the chakra is about. So that's releasing any limitations that you have. So that getting to that joy state, you know, it's not a fucking overnight, you know, I take a pill and I'm there. It takes work, people. It takes work. You know, don't jump onto some bandwagon looking for some quick, instant release. You know, that's addictive behaviours. What we're talking about is work that takes time. You know, that's why you use coaches like us, the energy coaches, mindfulness coaches, because we're standing beside you. We're walking the steps with you in empathy. And that's the difference. That's where the positive self-talk comes in. And that's where we say, you know, we will shield what matters to us. That's how self-protection needs to occur at these times. Crystals, cord cutting, energy healing, therapies. You know, there's so many things that people do that relate to them, and I think it's key.
And releasing it and letting it go. For me, a lovely analogy I really resonated with me was the Japanese with pottery, for example, with bowls. They'll have a bowl and it'll be cracked, and they'll repair the bowl and use gold as the solder to melt the pieces back together, like as the welding it. And that will be seen as a beautiful piece because it's for being broken. So they've made the flaw the actual feature. Yeah. So that's a good thing to remember. Your flaw can become your feature. So you see it with young girls who go, oh, I can't believe I've got curly hair, I just want straight hair. And the best thing about them is their curly hair, and they actually want to dumb down or negate their best features because we're seeing ourselves as flawed or not whole, as in need of repair, when we're actually we're not in need of repair. Part of our self-maintenance and our self-care, like coming back to this radical self-care idea, is that we regularly forgive ourselves, flush out our system of all those that can build up that
conditions.
Yeah, the resentment and the bitterness can build up, and we forgive ourselves and say, hey, I made a mistake. It's not the end of the world. I'm not a bad person. It was a bad behavior. Like, to distinguish that, your behavior, your choices do not define you. They're not. You don't have to carry them with you like as a burden of shame. And shame came up for us a lot talking about this, the sacral chakra. And physically, it's your sacrum is that part of your the bones, like just above your buttocks there, but also the bowl of your pelvis is shaped like a bowl to hold, and it's designed to hold, isn't it? And that's also like the creative and sexual and sensual center of your physical body. So that's the sacral chakra as well. So we're also not approaching that with a grim seriousness as though, oh, it's sex and we've got to be quiet and oh, here we go, it's all hardcore stuff. It's actually light, it's actually fun, it's an organic process. It's not something that's run by like social mores or restrictions or Victorian ideas of long skirts to your ankles and stuff like that. It can be really simple, and just breaking it right down and forgiving yourself. You are just a human animal, and you are just having these natural physical urges, and that's what we do. Doesn't need to be dressed up with layers of obligation and guilt. But yeah, self-forgiveness. I want to talk about shame.
Yeah, because I think that's really key, because Bren picked that up there about the sexuality and the sensuality. I will just go into the little depth of this neural pathway. As a scientist, I'm very keen on, the technology of the MRI scans and what they're doing. It's unbelievable how they can monitor your neural pathways. And the whole idea with goal setting and motivating yourself with goal setting, and that's even like simple statements, is your neural pathways. So you need to reprogram your neural pathways. So that's with the positive. So every time negative stuff comes up, stop. You need to say, no, I'm actually worthy. Now, I can say this to you because Bren brought it up about the sexuality. Now, I am a child, I'm a woman actually, but I was a child of sexual abuse by the church. So the issue of that for me is that it took me years. So it didn't just happen where I released the limiting beliefs, but I see the absolute, need that we take charge of releasing the limiting beliefs and releasing being the victim, number one, but obviously you can go through different stages because you're grieving your innocence in your childhood. But the thing is too, we need to remember that we need to reconnect to our divine self and our divine worth, and nobody can keep you locked as a prisoner in a cell. Now the key for me there was that as an adult, I need, and only I have the key to unlock myself out of the cell. So if you have been a child of any sort of abuse, even just being told you're stupid 100 times, like these things stay in our energetic fields. And it's really, really key that we unlock that prison cell that they have kept us in that trauma state, and we reclaim who we are. And no one can do that but you. You know, I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on therapies and chasing things and, you know, trying to get the answers. The answers are actually in ourselves, and that is the self-worth, the affirmations of the self. And, you know, it's not quick fix. You know, we talk a lot about this. It's not quick fix. You know, we need to realise that the constant changing of the pathways and the constant releasing is a daily affair.
It's not a quick fix, but it's a daily maintenance to keep on top of it and to not resign yourself to wallowing in that feeling of being unworthy or not enough. It's always resetting and redirecting yourself to go, no, I'm actually, and that's the neural pathways. It's the neural pathways, if you're not familiar with it, for me was described like a rainforest. And when you go through the rainforest, you've got to slash your way through all the vines and the undergrowth, and that creates a track, and then that track becomes worn and suddenly it becomes a road, and then eventually it becomes a 2-lane highway. Then over time it becomes a 6 or 8 or 15 lane super highway. All right, so that's your neural pathways over time. If you've been following that same route over and over again for decades. Now, when we're trying to change our neural pathways, we're saying, well, no, we're going to strike out in this direction. We're going to release, forgive, and be positive and focus on what we can bring and what we can do. So we've got to slash a new path through this dense undergrowth with a machete, starting from scratch, when we still have that superhighway right there as an option. So always our default setting will be to fall back on the superhighway. Yeah. But we have to go, no, I'm going to keep forging this little bush track through the rainforest and make that into a little goat track, and then it turns into a 2-lane highway. And over time, if you don't maintain the freeway, it starts cracking and weeds grow, and that will come overgrown. It won't be accessible, and then this new neural pathway will be the way forward. So that is self-forgiveness. It's unhooking yourself from that old story, because it can be an old story you fall into and go, like you can be snubbed in a lineup at the movies for a movie ticket, and then it hooks in to the trigger, and suddenly you're ruminating on your childhood episode. And it can be within seconds. So being snubbed at the traffic lights can turn into the child abuse within 100 metres of driving, and then you're down in that state, and to emerge back up is such can just stay there all day. So you end up adopting unworthy behaviours, you're eating the junk, you're not exercising, the addiction behaviours. With me personally, that was my trigger for addiction was so subtle. It was like a hair trigger. I could take any slight or anything that went wrong during the day when I was in business and turn that into a trigger for a drinking episode. Or, on the other hand, I could turn it into a reason to celebrate, which was another drinking episode. So everything, all roads led to Rome.
I was just going to say that.
And that's the neural pathway that I had to break, was to say, regardless of what happens during the day, whether I win or lose or break my leg or get a trophy, I still have to go home and not drink. Like, I can't commiserate or celebrate. I just have to go home and be in the feeling or be in the space, okay? And that's with self-forgiveness. So when bad things happen or things, unfortunate events, I'd have to forgive myself for that. But it's a challenge when you've got that established neural pathway. The super highway is just there. Oh, it's so easy. Boom, straight to there. And that's the challenge with addiction and moving on from those behaviours. It's such a big part of this second stage. So let's get back into the whole framework. We've established a solid foundation with being grounded. Now we're moving up to self-forgiveness. So we're actually clearing out some of the old junk in the garage or the basement, right? So now we can actually move up to the next step, can't we? Because we've got a solid foundation. We've cleared out there's some old junk that didn't serve us.
And we're asking you now then, on top of that, to think about your worthiness. So that's key as well in this forgiveness stage. We're slowly getting up to the looking at yourself and the worthiness and what you're releasing, all that stuff that we talked about, the limitations.
So my question for this the self-forgiveness, the trigger I wanted you to work on after this is go through and do an inventory or do an audit of yourself. And what I want you to do is list your failures. Okay, it's pretty confronting. So list your failures. What are your deepest personal failures, your deepest personal flaws? And they'll be, you know, you can get them within 3 seconds off most people. It's actually, you don't have to share it with anyone. So you're just physically writing that down, but bullet points, 3 or 6 words for each failure or flaw. And let's just do 2 or 3 maximum, even just the big one, if you want to get that out of the way. Then, for each of those flaws, let's just say we've done 2. For the first flaw, instead of seeing it as a failure and a catastrophe, we're going to turn that into a learning experience and say, what did I learn from that experience?
Yeah.
And for me, one of my biggest flaws was the cycle of having drinking-related episodes. This is 10 years ago, of having catastrophic drinking episodes where it'd be just, my life would go to total shit just from drinking-related episodes. In particular, they just varied. You can add them up, like either end up in court or running around the streets at night, stuff like that, or money things. So it was always like that. So I can list those, and then I've got to write equal sign next to it and say, what did I learn from that? I learned that alcohol is not the answer, I guess, as a simple thing. But if you want to go deeper, I learned that going through old stories doesn't serve me. So had to make some massive transformations and different coping mechanisms. And if we can do that individually turn our failures into learning experiences and see them as that, that's a massive key to self-forgiveness, because it's not about, they weren't failures at all. They were opportunities to learn, and you've forgiven yourself because they're learning. Okay, so it's huge. The language you use around this space is really important. So yeah, to be gentle, self-forgiveness, yeah, just be gentle and dial it down. You're not. Because
we talked about this together, and we talked about the fact that the word shame keeps coming up to us when we're writing this course. You know, we're talking about self-forgiveness and it's linked to shame. Yeah. And how the word shame is half the problem.
Yeah, massively toxic. Even the off-the-hand use of the word, people say it to me in the last few days, they've gone, it's a shame I couldn't make it to your workshop. And I go, it's not a shame, it's unfortunate or it's not ideal, but to bundle that as a shame experience, when shame, vibrationally shame is lower, there's like shame is the bottom, then guilt, then we start moving up towards love and appreciation and grace and humility, but yet shame is right at the bottom. So self-forgiveness is inextricably tied. Self-forgiveness is the activity to avoid and release shame, and that's so important at this base level, isn't it? The sacral level. And looking at your body, what is around your sacral area, it's your hips, and a lot of, just going back to diet, a minute on the lips, a lifetime on the hips, is the shame of weight.
It is.
It's a massive thing. And I talk to people I work with, I say, we've got to do some video, and they go, I haven't lost 5 kilos or 10 kilos. And that shame of having some extra weight from not being able to resist the unlimited food choices we have, limits them so much. They've got to forgive themselves and say, no, well, this is where I'm at now. I'm going live. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's being able to forgive yourself is so multidimensional, and it's ultimately, if I had to describe it in a few words, being able to forgive yourself means you can participate, means you're back in the game. As we get older, the lack of self-forgiveness means we self-censor and we withdraw. Okay, so we're not playing the game because we go, oh, I can't go and sing on stage. I'm not that good. Like you're not forgiving yourself from previous experiences. So your comfort zone gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and you sort of end up
prisoner of fear.
Prisoner of fear. That's it. Well done.
Prisoner of fear.
We do. You're in a prisoner of fear. So that is it. We've got to make self-forgiveness an active daily self-care part of our ritual.
So my question to you was, where are you limiting your beliefs based on your past story? You know, the junk in your trunk. What are you carrying along with you in the present right now? All you have is the present.
That's it, yeah.
What self-sabotaging, numbing behaviours are you using to dampen your actual worthiness? You know, you have a divine calling, and what if that is the story that you have had on this planet as a human? What if it's my child abuse and I'm sitting here today because that's my story, that was my past. It's not who I am in the now, but it's I'm here because I take charge of this moment. I stand in this moment, and I choose to bring my spirit to this moment, and I choose to be purpose driven. So if my story helps someone, then bless.
And it does.
Yeah.
You don't know how transformative it is, because the people you shift don't leave a comment and go, oh, thank you, that's changed my worldview, because they don't know it themselves either, but it's the subtle chipping away at the wall, and that's what breaks the dam, okay? It's these subtle things. So we're all part of that universal energy, which we'll discuss in an upcoming video.
So, awesome. Thank
Excellent.
you.
Thanks a lot. We'll talk next one.